Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure today on this occasion of the birth centenary of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. One of the reasons we wanted a very special speaker today was the issue of human rights. This is not even an ordinary question. This is a huge big question of more than 150 million untouchables in India. Such a big question of human rights does not exist anywhere in the world to that extent. When we were thinking about having a very special guest to talk on this subject, the first name came to our mind of a great Canadian, a great native, a great human being who is doing a human service to this nation. He has done more than many Canadians dream in the shortest possible time. Dr. Ambedkar used the most democratic means to get human rights and justice for his people. He was the chief architect of India's constitution. He put the justice, liberty, equality in the constitution as a part of it. He implemented affirmative actions, and he fought only through the democratic means. He wanted to change India. He used the law and order to bring the justice. When we look from that perspective of using the Constitution to the fullest extent of bringing the justice to the people who deserve most, the Aboriginal people of this nation, the people who should have been treated better, placed better, looked after by the later founding people of this nation. And ladies and gentlemen, there couldn't be any better person to talk today than Honorable ELIJAH Harper. Honorable Harper.
Thank you very much, Yugesh, for those kind remarks. I'd like to thank the organizers and for inviting me to speak here, and thank the people who worked so hard to make this a reality. And as an Aboriginal person, I can speak well of our tremendous struggles in this country. And so I'm very honored to have been asked to speak to you here today. And many of you may not know what MLA means. That means the member of the Legislative Assembly. I was here speaking some time ago, and I was signing autographs, and your provincial members of parliament are referred to as MPPs. And when I was signing autographs, I signed it as MLA, and this particular individual wanted to know what that meant. And this individual thought it meant meets like a cord, not... So MLA means, represents a member of the Legislative Assembly. I am not sure where to begin to talk about justice and peace and equality here in Canada. I think I was asked here to bring some thoughts, some parallels and things that are happening in India with the untouchables. And certainly I feel the kind of pain and suffering they have endured for many years, hundreds of years. And certainly the kind of conditions that they live in are certainly greater than those experienced by our Aboriginal people in this country. But still, as Aboriginal people, we still have great injustices that have to be addressed in this country. As an Aboriginal person living in this country, I've always said that, we should have been the most well-off people in this country as Aboriginal people. But yet, we are the poorest of the people in our own homeland, which we call Canada today. We have been excluded from participation for a long time. Many Canadians don't realize that as Aboriginal people, we were given or allowed to vote only 30 years ago. And all during that time as Aboriginal people, the laws that were made in this country were done without the approval or participation of Aboriginal people. We didn't say what kind of laws would be made for Aboriginal people in this country. And I've been in Parliament, provincial Parliament, for some time now. This is my 10th year in the legislature, and I have been a leader in my community, been chief for a number of years, been involved in trying to advance the interests and the rights of Aboriginal people in this country from the time, I was able to speak, I guess, at least in the community, provide that leadership, even through school and high school and university. So it seems that I'm always fighting all the time, fighting against the governments, institutions in this country. When I look at the human rights violations being made against Aboriginal people in this country, and when I look at other parts of the world, whether it be in India, South Africa, South America, Central America, and all over the world, that those injustices, human rights, have to be addressed by all people. The government. Aboriginal people, Aboriginal parents now today, suffering. It's been happening. There's a healing process happening today. And we still have many of our young people, many of our people wandering around the streets and all over the country, seeking their identity, don't even speak their language. And that's a result of the policies of this government. Because once you destroy the language of any culture, then you destroy that individual and their heritage and their culture. One of the things that also happened in this country is that, governments pass laws against our ceremonies, pass laws outlawing our dances, outlawing the sun dances, outlawing the potlatch ceremonies. Basically outlawing your spirituality, how you manifest that relationship with the Creator. Because spirituality is a way of life for Aboriginal people. How you relate to yourself as a human being. How you relate to your family, how you relate to the other human beings, how you relate to the environment. Basically outlawing that spirituality, how you manifest that kind of relationship even with your Creator. That's what the governments did. Pass laws of our spirituality, against our spirituality, to outlaw our spirituality. Basically you might have been just robots running around this country with no heart and no soul. Because if you're going to experience peace, if you're going to have love and joy, if you're going to have understanding with yourself, with other people, with the environment, you need to have that spirituality. But governments in this country denied all those things, because if you're going to have any sense of value or moral values, you need to have that. But I said, as Aboriginal people, we have persevered and survived those policies of genocide and colonization in this country because of who we are, because of what we believe in, because we believe in peace and justice and equality for all people. Our spirit is very strong. And that's the reason why that we have survived all those laws. And when I talk to the young people, our young Aboriginal children, I tell them, we are a great people. We are a great nation. What makes you great is not what you acquire materially. What makes you great is what you're able to give and share. And as Aboriginal people, this country, we have demonstrated that to the rest of the world, what kind of people we are. Because we have welcomed people from all over the world into this country. And we have never denied anyone this country of their language, their culture, or their religion. We shared our land and resources with the newcomers, with the governments in this country, so that everyone would benefit from what we have today. But as Aboriginal people, the relationship we have with the governments have not benefited us at all. But we are still strong. Our spirits are very strong. We're very rich in our culture and our heritage. But we have been oppressed and suppressed by governments in this country. We are not recognized in the supreme law of this land of who we are. And we are very special people. We have a special relationship with the governments in this country. Special not in the sense that we are superior to anyone, but because of the relationship and treaties that we have made with the governments in this country. And governments have not lived up to the treaties and promises to the Aboriginal people. One of the things that we want able to have is to totally control the affairs, our own affairs, and control our own future and destiny. That's what I mean when we talk about self-government. It means that is to have that ability to control our own lives and our own future. That it doesn't mean denial of any other rights of other people in this country. Because we have been controlled by the governments of this country for far too long. Even getting the governments in this country to recognize that we've always had governments in this country, to recognize in the Canadian Constitution. You know, we've always had governments here for 10,000 years or more. It isn't as if when the first settler people or the European people arrived here that they found Aboriginal people running around all over the continent with no kind of order. That's not the case. We had communities. We had our own political structure, our own social structures. We did trade with other nations in this continent. We've always had that. As I often say that, you know, if the Canadian governments can embrace and recognize the common laws of Great Britain as part of the Canadian structure, what is more Canadian than to recognize the traditional laws of Aboriginal people in this country? It's nothing different. And our philosophy would ensure that we treat everyone equally, as we have demonstrated, you know, for a long time to the people, this country. You know, as Aboriginal people, every time when we get up or to demonstrate and try to uphold the rights as Aboriginal people, our Aboriginal and treaty rights as Aboriginal people, what happens? Even defending our territory. What happened in Oka was something that should not never happened in this country. I mean, the issue wasn't about Mohawks toting guns. That wasn't the issue. The issue was about the lack of insensibility, the lack of political will by the governments to uphold the treaties made to Aboriginal people. And besides that, the Mohawk people were blocking the road, blocking the people from developing their territory, their sacred grounds and burial grounds, blocking the development so that the golf course wouldn't be developed. I mean, what they were developing was a golf course so that the privileged few can chase this white ball around. I have never played golf, but what would the people say here in Toronto if we, as Aboriginal people, wanted to develop a golf course in their cemeteries? What kind of reaction would we get? It's no different than Aboriginal people, no different than any other group of people. But worst of all, you know, leaders, you know, sent in a police force to resolve this issue. And later on we see the Canadian Army being sent in to try to resolve this issue. I'm sure there were more soldiers and deployed at that incident than all the soldiers sent to Iraq. And we see, you know, RCMP arresting people in Mount Currie to live with people, for standing up for their rights. We see an individual person being arrested in Old Man River in Alberta for standing up for their rights. You tell me who are the real aggressors in this case? Who's applying force? Have you ever heard of anyone being prosecuted in this country for violating Aboriginal rights? No one. And once we get into those kind of situations, we see our Aboriginal brothers being arrested and being prosecuted, being criminally prosecuted, and they have to take a criminal case, criminal defense. And we as Aboriginal people appear to be criminals in standing up for our rights and make us appear as the ones breaking the laws. All we're doing is upholding the rights that we have as Aboriginal people, and we want to have the governments change laws so that the rights of the Aboriginal people are recognized. But we are still long ways from resolving these issues. When I mentioned that the policies of the governments, the colonial policies, the governments are still alive and well, they are still alive and well. And the kind of attitudes that we have to overcome. You know, we just look at the recent court case decision in BC with Judge Alan McEachran dealing with the Gitz and Wet'suwet'en case. You know, in which he said that the Aboriginal rights don't exist. The rights of the Aboriginal people are at the pleasure of the Crown. That when the people applied for recognition for a territory, that the Nisga'a, I mean the people in that area, have exercised their sovereignty for 10,000 years, that it was not recognized by this particular judge. It is as if we didn't exist, that somehow this world, and this world which you call North America, that the world that this began only 500 years ago or at the time of colonization. And that's a great myth. I know that some people are planning to celebrate the arrival of Columbus 500 years ago. I can see other things to celebrate about, not certainly some people, some white person that arrived here 500 years ago lost and we were the ones that discovered this person. I mean, there has to be some truth, some realities. And part of that is the education process that we teach about the development of this country. We don't hear any books about Aboriginal people and the role that we have played in the development of this country. That the history is totally biased because it's been written by white people. So we have to re-educate a lot of the people across the country. And as I travel, you know, people don't even know that we have treaties with the governments. Many Canadian people don't even know that we have treaties with the Canadian government. And that in the treaties that they were supposed to provide health care and education for our people. And many people view the education that we receive as free. That's not the case. Those things that we signed up for treaties we expect the government to honor, because we've shared our land and resources with the governments in this country and we have not benefited at all. I'm sure that the Canadian governments have benefited billions and billions of dollars off the land and resources in this country, that they can live up to the promises made to the Aboriginal people. And certainly the education that we receive is not free at all. And those are some of the things that people are ignorant about the relationship that we have with the federal governments. And as Aboriginal people, we're not asking for anything more or for anything less. All we're asking for is the government to live up to the promises made to the Aboriginal people. And what we're asking for, the governments to honor the treaties. And as Aboriginal people, we have never broken the treaties. As a matter of fact, our elders respect those treaties. And those things have to be resolved. And what has happened in the last while with these issues is that governments have not really dealt with the Aboriginal people sincerely and honestly. Because of the events of the demise of the Meech Lake Accord and the Oka crisis and other demonstrations across the country, the awareness of Aboriginal issues have come at the national level at the forefront, even at the international level. And governments today have not really dealt with these issues. You would think they would have learned, something from the past year and built on that for a positive relations in the country. The Prime Minister, stated last fall that Aboriginal issues would be dealt with. Even the Aboriginal land claims will be accelerated. Nothing has really happened. Even with the federal government saying that once the Mohawk crisis is down, that they will start dealing with these issues. Nothing has really happened. I know that the federal government's announced some initiatives, and that's all that's happened so far is just talk. Just more talk. Because, one of the things that happened during the Meech Lake crisis was the Prime Minister sent his heavy hitters to meet with the Aboriginal people. One of the things they promised was a Royal Commission on Native Affairs and many other issues to be addressed. But the chiefs at that time said enough is enough. Promises made are just words, just merely words. It's time for action. That they didn't trust the federal government. As a matter of fact, about a couple of weeks after the chiefs had a meeting in Edmonton, the summit meeting of chiefs, and they encouraged the Prime Minister to proceed with the Royal Commission. The federal government declined to proceed with the Royal Commission. It just shows the kind of leadership and shows that we can't trust the federal government. Even the Prime Minister I mentioned, that said in the House of Commons and said these issues would be dealt with. And what does he do? He sets up a commission, the Spicer Commission, and encourages Aboriginal people to go before this committee to deal with Aboriginal issues. Now the Special Commission has completed its findings and meetings. All of a sudden we hear an announcement that federal government is going to establish a Royal Commission on Aboriginal issues. So, these initiatives keep happening, announcements being made, but nothing is really happening. I mean, you get to the point of, being overstudied. I mean, another commission, another study, and just ridiculous. I mean, we've spent millions of dollars on studies. I mean, to study the situations back home, I don't need a study to tell me I have a broken outdoor toilet. I mean, I'd see that. What we need is action from the governments to start doing things. And it's frustrating in addressing these issues. I don't know what it takes for this government to act. And many Aboriginal people, Aboriginal leaders are frustrated with the governments. And what I find encouraging is that many Canadian people are supporting the Aboriginal people and their issues, begin to question their governments, asking questions why they have not resolved many of the land claims. So those things are happening, and I'm not sure as to what will happen in the future if the governments don't begin to address these issues, particularly the federal government. Because what we are talking about as Aboriginal people in this country is nothing different from what other Canadian people want. Who want able to have security, want able to have good homes, want able to have opportunities out there. What we're talking about is equality, justice. It's nothing different. But we have been suppressed for far too long as Aboriginal people. So when I talk about those issues, we're trying to achieve a better living conditions for our young people, provide a better future for our young people, provide a world in which everyone has all the amenities in life, to live in harmony with each other, to live in peace with each other, to treat each one no different than any other one. Those are the basic things that we as Aboriginal people are trying to achieve. But if we are continually being opposed and oppressed, how can we advance those objectives that are so essential to a better world for all people? Because we as Aboriginal people have so much to offer in this country and indeed all over the world. And oftentimes, when I talk about all these conditions back home in our backyards, the high suicide rate, high unemployment, 90% in some cases, and the high teenage suicide rate and other social conditions, that people across the country somehow are so oblivious to it. Like, they seem to have a blind eye to it. That somehow, there's no reaction. I know that if these things are happening in Toronto, let's say unemployment is 90% in Toronto, I'm sure there'll be a national outcry, or the high suicide teenage rate that exists in the communities. I don't think Canadians would tolerate with those kind of statistics. Watch TV and say, well, it was a good comments. I learned more. And sit back and just forget about it. The kind of policies the governments have in place has to change. And the tax dollars that you pay supports those kinds of initiatives. And you have a responsibility as people to change those policies, to tell to the governments those kind of conditions cannot be tolerated in this country. And that's the responsibility and the challenge that I bring you here today. And as an individual, I will continue to speak for the oppressed people, continue to speak for peace and justice for all people. I know those things sometimes are hard to achieve. Even trying to achieve peace, maybe it's easier to react in some cases. Trying to maintain peace is maybe more difficult to do. I guess the greater threat, to all these, to Aboriginal people, the fear is not those people that are oppressing the people or being racist. The fear is that the people, the inaction of the people. Because we have to act. Because inaction, I think, causes things to happen, not to speak against these kind of things that we believe in. So, in closing, I'd like to say that it's been a great honor to have been invited to speak to you here today and to bring to you about our own struggles as Aboriginal people, and also to support all the oppressed people all over the world, the people in India, the untouchables, who are experiencing oppression, suppression, freedoms. And we will continue to speak for that. And hopefully someday that we will be able to live with each other all over the world and able to provide the kind of things that all people should have enjoy, the basic rights, liberties, freedoms of all people. So with those few comments, I thank you for inviting me and to share my few thoughts with you. And as an Aboriginal person, that you will support us in our struggles in trying to achieve self-determination and our rightful place here in Canada. Thank you very much. Miigwech.